In 2010, Edward Rosenthal embarked on a short trail in the isolated desert of Lower California. Little did he know, Rosenthal would spend the next 6 days wandering 39 kilometers, completely lost in the vast and scorching desert canyons with minimal food and water. Edward Rosenthal, a 64-year-old real estate broker and poet, was an experienced hiker who meticulously documented his hiking experiences in a personal journal. In 2010, after a successful real estate sale in downtown Los Angeles, he decided to celebrate by camping and hiking in California's Joshua Tree National Park. Equipped with a rimmed hiking hat, 3 liters of water, snacks, a small blanket, a whistle, and flares, Rosenthal set out on a short-day trail along the canyons from Black Rock campgrounds. Despite his seemingly adequate preparation, the barren desert landscapes often looked indistinguishable in all directions, making it easy to lose the right path. While initially on the correct trail, Rosenthal eventually realized he had lost his way as he failed to recognize certain areas. In an attempt to find the main trail, he took a turn, unknowingly moving further from safety. After hiking for a day and a half, depleting his food and water supplies, Rosenthal found himself in a dire situation. Realizing that blindly hiking through the desert would only accelerate his dehydration, Rosenthal sought shelter in a small ravine along the canyons. Despite failed attempts with flares and a whistle, he sat against the ravine walls, waiting for rescue. By the 5th day of being lost with no signs of rescue, Rosenthal, starved and extremely dehydrated, began to lose hope. In a desperate act, he wrote farewell messages to his wife and daughter on the rim of his hat, expressing his love and urging them to celebrate his life rather than mourn his death. Unbeknownst to Rosenthal, on Saturday afternoon, the hotel where he stayed noticed his absence and authorities were alerted. A search was initiated on Sunday, involving 60 rescuers, helicopters, ground search teams, and search dogs. After 3 days of intense efforts, they discovered tracks they believed to be Rosenthal's and followed them to the ravine where they lost the trail. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ravine, Rosenthal continued to wait. On Thursday morning, a helicopter spotted him waving shiny reflective fabric against the ravine wall. Rescued after 6 days, Rosenthal received medical treatment and made a full recovery. Rosenthal's decision to halt his wandering and wait for rescue likely played a crucial role in his survival, conserving water and energy. Upon safely returning home, he penned one last entry in his hiking journal: "Still here." Jimmy Hale, a relatively affluent resident of Massachusetts in the early 1900s, developed a fascination for archaeology and fossils in 1928, despite having no professional background or hiking experience. Determined to explore this newfound interest, he delved into books on bushcraft and archaeology before embarking on a journey to the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. Despite being underprepared, Hale considered himself an expert based on his brief readings. Upon arrival, he enlisted the help of Vance Randolph, an experienced artifact hunter in the Ozark territory. Despite Hale's overconfidence and attempts to correct Vance's knowledge, they began their expedition, setting up small camps along the trail to search for artifacts and fossils. After 2 weeks of traversing the Ozark Range, they were close to a nearby village. One morning, Hale decided to hike down to the village, planning to return before sundown. Vance assured him that the trail was straight and safe. As the day progressed, Hale did not return, leading Vance to believe he might have stayed in the village overnight. Waiting for Hale proved futile, and the next morning Vance, concerned, sought the help of a local lumberjack named Lim. Together they discovered a small, shallow cave just 2 miles from their camp, containing items from Hale's backpack, indicating he had slept there. This raised uncertainty about Hale's whereabouts. Vance and Lem continued searching, and soon they encountered Hale. However, he displayed erratic behavior, shaking his head and charging at Vance with apparent rage. After a chase, Hale sprinted into the dense woods. Following his tracks, they found him lying face down in a snowbank. Upon waking up, Hale was confused and could only recall getting lost, crossing his own trail, and suddenly feeling extreme fear, prompting him to run into the woods aggressively. The cause of his frightening experience remained unknown. Once Hale recovered, he was sent back to Massachusetts, leaving the mystery of what transpired during his Ozark Mountains expedition unsolved. On July 6, 2018, Angela Hernandez awoke to find herself trapped in her SUV, floating in the Pacific Ocean. Her memory was hazy, and she couldn't recall how she ended up there. Over the next 7 days, Angela clung to life in a harrowing ordeal. Earlier that day, Angela was driving along a coastal highway in Central California, enjoying the scenic views of the ocean. However, her peaceful drive took a terrifying turn when an animal ran onto the road. In an attempt to avoid a collision, Angela swerved but lost control, sending her SUV tumbling 200 feet off a cliff and crashing into the ocean. After a period of unconsciousness, Angela awoke to find herself still in the submerged car, water rising over her knees. Despite the pain and injuries, she managed to break a window with a multi-tool, swim to the rocky cliffside, and eventually passed out. Upon regaining consciousness, Angela realized the isolation of her predicament. The cliff was in a remote area, and she was stranded on a deserted rocky beach. With no way up the steep terrain, she could only see her wrecked SUV against the rocks below. Angela, in her deteriorating condition, began searching for help along the rocky terrain. Despite hearing passing cars on the road above and seeing vehicles in the distance, she was unable to attract attention. She spent nights on the rocks, exposed to the elements. Authorities were alerted to Angela's disappearance, and a search team was deployed. However, persistent coastal fog hindered rescue efforts for days. Unbeknownst to them, Angela was battling critical conditions on the rocks below. For 6 days, Angela used a salvaged hose to collect water from the mossy rocks, surviving on mere droplets. She helplessly watched cars pass by on the highway above, unable to reach her. It wasn't until Friday the 13th that a couple, Chad and Chelsea, discovered the wreckage while exploring the seldom visited beach. They found Angela partially submerged between rocks and called for rescue. First responders quickly descended the cliff, treated her injuries, and transported her to the hospital. Angela, despite suffering severe injuries, including a brain hemorrhage, fractured collarbone and ribs, and a collapsed lung, made a remarkable recovery. Her resilience and the fortuitous discovery by Chad and Chelsea led to Angela's survival in this extraordinary tale of endurance and survival.